Americans For Fair Taxation presents the weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, president of Americans For Fair Taxation, and recorded by Bob Paxton, a volunteer with the Florida FAIRtax Educational Association. And now, this week's Chairman's Report.
Hello, I'm Bob Paxton with the AFFT Chairman's Report for Friday, April 12th, 2019. Many Americans see the demand by Richard Neal, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee for President Trump's income tax returns, as a sideshow that has little effect on them. They know that Mr. Neal and the president will both employ legions of lawyers, probably nothing's going to happen for years, and they also recognize that political pundits will talk about this situation endlessly. Now, defenders of the income tax have often asserted that even though all of us are required under penalty of perjury, meaning if we lie, we've committed a criminal offense, they assert that tax returns are confidential. Now, most people think that the personal information on their federal tax returns is confidential, and that's true to a point. The law relating to the confidentiality of income tax returns is stated in 26 U.S. Code 6103, Confidentiality and Disclosure of Returns and Return Information. The section that applies to this request is Section F. Quoting now, upon written request from the chairman of the Committee on Ways and Means of the House of Representatives, the chairman of the Committee on Finance of the Senate, or the chairman of the Joint Committee on Taxation, the Secretary shall furnish such committee with any return or return information specified in such request, except that any return or return information which can be associated with or otherwise identify, directly or indirectly, a particular taxpayer shall be furnished to such committee only when sitting in closed executive session, unless such taxpayer otherwise consents in writing to such disclosure. End of quote. In an article written for Politico entitled Why Congress Might Not Get Trump's Tax Returns, Ross Garber, an attorney specializing in political investigations, gave an analysis of the current law. Mr. Garber pointed out that while IRS Code 6103F appears to give the committee the power to get the tax returns, the Supreme Court has held that Congress can't use its powers to delve into someone's private financial matters unless there's a proper legislative purpose, and that Congress is not a law enforcement agency that can seek information to uncover or expose crimes. As the title of his article states, unless the House moves to impeach the president, they will have some serious problems obtaining his tax returns. Now, what if President Trump provides the tax returns? Will they be kept secret? Although there is no law requiring the president or a candidate for president to release their federal income tax returns, it's become standard practice since 1973. Now, few of us are naive enough to believe that if the Ways and Means Committee obtained the president's tax returns, that they would not be leaked to the press. Doing this would be a federal crime, but there's a much easier way for a member to make the returns public that is immune from prosecution. Article 1, Section 6 of the U.S. Constitution states, the senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services to be ascertained by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. They shall in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of the peace be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses and in going to and returning from the same. And for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. Because of this provision in the Constitution, if a member of the Ways and Means Committee went to the floor of the House and discussed the president's income tax returns and even placed them in the public record, there's almost no chance of prosecution, assuming that they appeared to be conducting legislative business. Even if a court ruled that the releasing of the income tax returns was improper, it'd be too late. Providing his income tax returns to the Ways and Means Committee is almost certainly the same as the president making them public. Now, here's the question that should be asked but isn't. Americans instinctively know that if a government can abuse the rights of one citizen, they can abuse the rights of other citizens. The question for Congress and the president is, why should Americans be forced to submit income tax returns at all when there's a more efficient way to fund the government, the fair tax? Many income tax protesters have argued that making you complete a federal income tax return and sign it under the penalty of perjury is actually a violation of both the Fourth and Fifth Amendments to the Constitution. The Fourth Amendment states, The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, and no warrant shall issue but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the person or things to be seized. The Fifth Amendment states, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval forces or in the militia when in actual service in time of war or public danger. Nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to twice be put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, while the right to privacy is not explicitly guaranteed by the Fourth Amendment, many court decisions have relied on the Fourth Amendment to justify determining that there was a right to privacy for one group or another. The Fifth Amendment protects a person from being compelled to be a witness against himself. Strictly speaking, filing an income tax return and saying that it's true is being a witness against yourself. Of course, the courts have held that these arguments are invalid when made by income tax protesters. Many in Congress correctly point out that when you fill out a loan form, a driver's license form, or a myriad of other forms, you are giving up privacy and are being a witness against yourself in that it could be a criminal offense if the information is incorrect. Now, there is a difference. Filing an income tax form is mandatory, and if you don't, it can subject you to civil and even criminal penalties. Doing the other filings is your choice. If you don't drive, for example, there's no need to apply for a driver's license. In conclusion, the swamp and many members of Congress delight in any events that will draw our attention away from the truth. This entire income tax disclosure drama is unnecessary. If we had a sane tax system like the fair tax, there would be no need for any of us to expose our private information about our income and spending to anyone unless we choose to. Sometimes we forget that opposition to the present income payroll tax system is not just opposition to a system that is economically far worse than the fair tax, imposes a huge record-keeping and reporting burden on Americans that would not be needed under the fair tax, continues to reduce job creation in the United States, continues to be almost impossible to understand, and continues to be widely evaded, a projected $9 trillion in the next decade. Opposition to the present income payroll tax system is opposition to a form of tyranny imposed on us by the federal government. All of us live under the cloud of possible attack from the IRS that could result in financial ruin or worse. Why? Because the swamp and its affiliated members in Congress want to constantly remind us that they have the power to directly affect us if we get out of line. If they can obtain the president's federal income tax returns and, with no civil or criminal liability, reveal them to the world, then they can do it to anyone else that they believe is a threat. Even if we're not concerned about anything being revealed, we're still not eager to have our data widely available to all when it was supposed to be confidential. Freedom from this type of government control over our lives is what, for many years, made the U.S. so different from the rest of the world. The swamp and their member allies agree with Adolf Hitler's statement, "How fortunate for governments that the people they administer don't think." The swamp and their member allies are eroding our freedoms every day, and make no mistake about it, they are doing this for the purposes of controlling us so that they can make enormous profits at our expense. Martin Niemöller, the Lutheran pastor who was sent to a concentration camp by the Nazis and died there, said, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me." Some say that the way to speak out is with violence or civil unrest. However, we can strike a mighty blow for freedom by working together to rid the swamp and their members of Congress of a tool that enriches them and provides them control over us, the income payroll tax system.
This has been the Weekly Chairman's Report, written by Steve Hayes, President of Americans for Fair Taxation. Check back every week for news and information about the fair tax. and learn why the fair tax should replace our antiquated federal income tax system. If you'd like to receive a copy of the Chairman's Report in your inbox every week, sign up at fairtax.org or bigsolution.org.